This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. We're less than 2 weeks until Yom Tov of Kabbalas HaTorah, and we're all preparing ourselves to have a proper Kabbalas HaTorah to upgrade our commitment and our level of learning. So we'd like to dedicate today's Shiur to the topic of what practical means, steps, methodologies can we take to enhance and elevate our level of learning. So we're going to call the Shiur the 10 steps to success in learning. 10 steps to success in learning. Now, to limit it to 10, how could we do such a thing? The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos there are 48 ways to be kind to Torah, but at least to my humble mind, and everybody could have their own list, these were the 10 most important things that come to mind, and everybody could compose their own list. And if Be'ezus Hashem were able to even attempt to try to follow one of these 10 ways, we'll already be a step ahead of almost everybody else. Okay, so we begin with step number 1. And that is, the Pasuk says in Tehillim in Perek Lamed Beis, David HaMelech says, Al Zois Yispalel Kol Chosid Eilecha Li'es Mitzoi. Al Zois, for this, let every pious person pray Le'es Mitzoi. In other words, David HaMelech is saying you need to pray for what? For this. Now what's this? You have to pray for everything in life. Remember when I was a kid, I once asked Victor Miller, Zechatzak Levracha, why do you have to daven for Olam Haba? We say, Rachamani Zakin L'Matzah Mashiach, V'L'chai Olam Haba. We daven for it. Either you do mitzvahs and you deserve it, or you don't do mitzvahs and you don't deserve it. What are you davening for it? So he said, no, you only have to daven for it if you want it. If you don't want it, you don't have to daven for it. Everything in life that you want, you have to daven. Nothing comes without tefillah. There is nothing in this world that comes without tefillah, whether it's parnasa, hatzach with children, everything requires tefillah. And yet, even though everything requires tefillah, David HaMelech says, daven for this. In other words, this is the most important thing to daven for. So the question is, what is this? The Gemara gives different explanations. Rav Nassan Omer, Le'es Mitzai, Zu Torah. Mitzai refers to Torah Shenemar, Ki Moitzai, Matzah Chayim. Torah is referred to as a finding. That as important as it is to daven for Parnasa, for health, for Banim, for whatever one needs, the most important thing to daven for is Torah. So you say, what? Why would that be the most important thing to daven for? Imagine if someone was embarking on a career of nuclear physics, and he was studying in college, in university, and he wasn't being successful, so we say, you know why you're not getting it? Because you're not davening enough. You're out of your mind. When it comes to nuclear physics, either you have the mental capacity, either you have the intelligence, or you don't have the intelligence. One would think Torah is the same thing. It's an intellectual discipline. Either you're cut out for it or you're not cut out for it. What we're going to learn today is that success in learning has very little to do with one's natural, raw abilities. Very little to do with it, and a lot to do with many other almost supernatural ingredients. And ingredient number 1 is Torah, is tefillah, is davening. So yes, when it comes to nuclear physics, if you daven, if you don't daven, it may have little to do with your success in understanding the material. But Torah is completely different. The Gemara says in Masechta Nida, number 3.
Even nuclear physics.
Yeah.
Without tefillah, you're not going to
anywhere. But more than anything else you need for Torah. It says the Gemara Nida, Shloisha divrei derech eretz, ma yasa adam v'yechkam. What should a person do to become wise? Right? And you could go to the store on Main Street, the vitamin store. They'll say there are a lot of things you could do. You could take omega-3 fish oil. You could take natural calm. You could take a lot of magnesium. There are a lot of things that you could do to make your brain power. They have all kinds of pills. You pop the pill, all of a sudden you become Albert Einstein. But ask the Gemara, what should you do to become wise? Amar Lohen, Yarbe b'yeshiva, sit and learn more, v'yimat b'schayra, and don't work too much. Right over here we got that down. Right? V'yimat b'schayra, don't work too much. So learn a lot and don't work too much. So the Gemara asks, it doesn't help everybody. Amru harbe yasukein v'loy hoyolahem. The Gemara says a lot of people try that. It doesn't help. Says the Gemara, here's the missing ingredient. Ella yevakshu rachamim mimisha chachma shalai. Even if you don't work too much and you sit and learn kol hayom v'kol halayla, you still won't necessarily be successful in learning. You need to daven. You need to daven. And according to David HaMelech, the most important thing to daven for, the thing that requires more tefillah than anything else, is limud Torah. So you say, why do I need to daven? Baruch Hashem, Hashem blessed me with a good head. I open up the Gemara, I sit and learn. No. The answer is, in life, there are a lot of circumstances that don't allow a person always to be successful in learning. Sometimes the person doesn't have the right shiur to go to. Sometimes the person doesn't have the right friends to be around.
You have to try, Rebbe.
Sometimes you have to try. Sometimes the person doesn't have the right Rebbe. Sometimes the person doesn't have the right circumstance. And you need to daven for the Rebbeinu Shalom to give a person the proper set of circumstances to be successful in learning. In fact, the Mishnah says in Brachos, there was a great Tana by the name of Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana, and he would be mispalel, haya mispalel b'knisasai leveis hamedrash. He would daven whenever he would enter the Beis Medrash, and uvi yitziyasai, and when he would leave the Beis Medrash, he would also daven. He would say a tefillah katsara. So they said to him, Ma makom l'tefillah zu. Why are you davening? Why do you have to daven? You're a smart man. Open the Gemara and learn. So Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana said, Amar lohem, b'knisasi ani mispalel. When I enter the shul, I daven. That I don't stumble, I don't say the wrong thing, I don't say a line and people misconstrue it and derive an incorrect halacha. Maybe I'll say something improper. I always daven that everything I say should be correct and true. And when I leave, I thank Hashem that I had the opportunity to learn. And the Gemara says, what would he daven when he entered? He would say, Yiratzim afanecha Hashem Elokai, Shelo Yera Dvar Takol Al Yadi, Lo Akasha B'Dvar Halacha, I shouldn't stumble in Halacha, V'yismechu Bi Chaveri, I shouldn't make a mistake and my friends rejoice, I shouldn't say Al Tamei Tar, V'Al Tar Tamei, V'lo Yikashu Chaveri B'Dvar Halacha, I shouldn't, my friends shouldn't stumble and I'll rejoice. Fine. Rabbi Isai, do you know anyone who says this tefillah? Did you ever see anyone who says this tefillah? They say in yeshivas, you know.
It's the beginning of the art scroll.
What? You open up every art scroll Gemara, every regular Gemara, there the tefillah appears. But do people say this tefillah? In the yeshivas, you know, when I was a bachar, 18, 19, and had nothing else on my head other than, you know, learning, I think there was a tkufa that I would say this tefillah. But bottom line, when people come to a shiur, before they start, anyone say this tefillah? Why not? Why aren't people saying this tefillah? So you say, well, that's what Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana did. I don't have to do everything Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana. After all, Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana was one of the greatest mikubalim of all time. He wrote the Sefer Akana. Not everything he did I have to do. Maybe it's a optional tefillah. Maybe it's a discretionary tefillah. Well, the Rambam in the Parish HaMishnaya says, Kishayichnas lebeis hamedrash ma chayiv loymar. What do you have to say? Okay, the Rambam didn't say this in the Yad HaChazaka. He said this in the Parsha Mishnayos. Maybe it's not an absolute chiyuv. What does the Shulchan Aruch say about this? I'll tell you what the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Kuf Yud, Hanichnas lebeis hamedrash yispalel. The Shulchan Aruch writes, this is a legislated tefillah. This is halacha psuka in Shulchan Aruch, black and white. When you start to learn, you need to say this tefillah. So you say, I know why we don't say this tefillah. Only poskim have to say this tefillah. If you're paskening a shaila, if let's say you're the kind of guy, you're sitting at the table with like 50 books, and you have these big thick glasses, these Pepsi Cola glasses, and when you're sitting and learning and someone comes, you don't even notice them for 10 minutes because you're so orangutan in the learning, and people come to ask you shailas, and then you have to declare what's the halach, it's machlokes shach and taz, right? So you have to say this tefillah because you don't want to make a mistake b'dvar halacha. But, you know, me and you, people are not asking major shailas over here, so maybe it's not important for us to say this tefillah. Says the Taz, it's not only someone who enters the Beis Medrash. Says Ataz in Siman Kofyud Arachayim Nirali Dehu Adin Bimi Sheyeshev Lilmoid. Someone who's sitting and learning, Afilu B'Yechidos, even by themselves, and especially if they're Poskim, but even if they're not Poskim, the Taz says you need to say this Tefillah. So why doesn't anyone say the Tefillah? Nobody here even raised their hands and I say it, right? Why doesn't anyone say the Tefillah? Maybe some people do, but I think it's really miyuta de miyuta. Says Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Kuf Yud Sivkat on Tezayin. He brings down the Gemara in Brachos Daf Chav Ches, and he brings down the Tefillah before and the Tefillah after. Right, the Tefillah after is Moed Ani Lefanecha Hashem Laikai Shesam Techelkim Yosher Beis HaMedrash. So I know what you're thinking. I do say that Tefillah every time I make a Siyum. Every 53 years when I make a Siyum, I say that Tefillah. No, I'm just joking. Okay, but that's not what he said. Every day he said this tefillah. Every day he said this tefillah. So says the Aruch HaShulchan, V'achshav lo nohagu bazeh. Nowadays, the minhag is we don't find people saying it.
Later.
Now he doesn't say v'zetos. He doesn't criticize Klal Yisrael. He is acknowledging the widespread custom that people don't say this tefillah. Now he's not saying it's correct not to say it, but he does say Lo nohagu bazeh, and you should know that when Jews do something, it means something. In other words, if it's against the halacha, people think, minhag bracht din. It's not true. Minhag is not oiker halacha. If you have a halacha, you can't contravene it, even if you have a minhag. But if there is no halacha, and you don't know what to do, then there's a rule, Ru'uma Amadaber. See what people are doing. That rule applies if there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. But when there's no halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Now in this case there is a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. But nevertheless, the Aruch HaShulchan is acknowledging the fact the minhag is not to say it. Now why? Why? V'nireh, like this. The lashon of the Mishnah is B'chnisasoi lebeis hamedrash. When he enters the Beis HaMedrash. So it says Aruch HaShulchan like this. Nowadays, when people are learning in yeshivas and learning in the Beis HaMedrash, they're not learning to paskin l'maisa. They're learning to be involved in limud HaTorah. They're learning to understand the lamdas, to understand the underpinnings. But there are very few people in the Beis Medrash that are learning in order to paskin. Who's learning in order to paskin? A Rav sitting in his study. So therefore says Aruch HaShulchan, Miman of Shach, you don't have to say the tefillah. The Rav in the study who's learning to paskin, he's not nichnas the Beis HaMedrash. And the Mishnah says when you're nichnas the Beis HaMedrash, you say the tefillah. And those who are nichnas the Beis HaMedrash, they're learning to understand the Ikarim, to understand the Yesaidos, but they're not learning lifsai halacha, and therefore Aruch HaShulchan uses this as a justification for why people don't say the tefillah. He's not saying that it is proper not to say it. He's not saying it's better not to say it. He's being mamlitz. It's a hamlotza on Klal Yisrael who, for whatever reason, are not saying it, and the Aruch HaShulchan offers this justification. Another possible justification is the Ritva. The Ritva says on this Gemara in Brachos in number 9, he makes the following comment: Demi sheroitze loymar hachi harashus biyadai. If you want to say this tefillah, you're allowed to. In other words, according to the Ritva, it's not a chiyuv like the Rambam says in the Parsha Mishnayos. According to the Ritva, it's a reshus. What do I need reshus? I could say any tefillah I want? No, not necessarily. You can't just make up tefillahs. You can't just add. You could make personal requests, but you sort of need permission. You would think maybe, or maybe you could say, here, you're about to enter the shul, so open the Gemara, don't waste time. You started saying tefillahs, you'll say the whole Anini. By the time you finish the Anini book, the Shiur will be over. You could be saying, books of Tchinos, Bakashas. By the time you get through it, 12 hours of Tchinos, Bakashas, and you remain an Amaras. So therefore the Gemara says, no, this tefillah you're allowed to say, you could say it quickly before you start learning. Another justification, if you look in the back of the Gemara Brachos, in microscopic print, you have a commentary called Hagois Re'em Horowitz. Any Horowitzes here? Oh, see? I could tell there was a Horowitz in the room. Right? So the Hagoyis Re'im Horowitz, he brings down a very interesting justification for the custom of not saying the tefillah. And that is, Minhag Ashkenaz is in the morning, we say the tefillah, Ahava Rabbah. Nusach starts as Ahava Solam, I believe, right? And at night we say Ahava Solam. Says the Hagoyis Re'im Horowitz, the tefillah of Ahava Rabbah, about 10 lines down, he says, the Inyan Hadavar, the Nusach Ahava Rabbah, hu ke'ein tfilas Reb Nechunya ben Akana. The tefillah of Ahava Rabbah, you're asking Hashem, Avinu ha'av harachaman, our Father, merciful Father, Hamerachim, who has mercy, Rachim Oleinu. What's the guy going to ask for? By the way, this is the most, the biggest bakasha, the whole davening, the bakasha with the most feeling, with the most emotion, with the most descriptions of Rachmanis. It sounds like somebody who chas v'shalom is in a desert and is about to dehydrate. What are you asking for? V'sein b'libeinu lahavin ulahaskel l'shmayelu. You're asking Bansham to give you siyata d'shmai in your learning. Says Re'im Horowitz, this is ke'ein tfilas Reb Nechunya ben Akana. And the nusach of Avas Olam is ke'ein tfilasai of Moidim Anachnu Lach, where he says, when he exits the Beis Medrash, he says, Moidani Fanecha, Shesamta Chelki Miyoshe Beis HaMedrash. Says Hagoyis Re'im Horowitz, V'hainu min Hagadidan, Uvazeh Anu Niftarin Mitfilas Reb Nechunya ben Akana, he concludes. That if you say Ahava Rabbah in the morning, and you say Avas Olam at night, that patters you, that exempts you from the tefillah of Reb Nechunya ben Akana. And even though the Tosfos Yom Tov is matmiya, why we don't say these tefillahs, but I'm telling you why. Because if you say Ahava Rabbah and Avas Olam, you're pater. Again, these are all justifications. Bottom line is, it's codified in Shulchan Aruch. And in the Sefer Orchos Rabbeinu, which were minhagim of the Stipler, he writes, Shamati b'shem Maran HaChazon Ish, I heard in the name of the Chazon Ish, Shaharoitze lahatzliach b'limudai, if you want to be successful in your learning, Yizayar loymar hayihiratzon shekaydim alimud. You should be careful to say it. Again, only if you want to be successful. If you don't want to be successful, then no problem. But if you want to be successful, then you should say it. Now, Rabbi Glatstein, if anybody wants a copy of the tefillah, I made you a copy of the tefillah. I'll give it to you. Be very happy to give it to you after. And the purpose of this first step, I'm not here to tell you yes to say it. I'm not here to tell you not to say it. The Gemara says to say it. Shulchan Aruch says to say it. Aruch HaShulchan acknowledges the fact that minhag is not to. Maybe there are justifications. Ritva says it's rishus. Maybe we pater ourselves with Ahava Rabbah, Avas Olam. I'm not here to tell you to say it not. I'm telling you one thing. The Gemara says in Brachos that the most important thing to daven for is le'es mitzai, is for Torah. If you want to be successful in Limud HaTorah, you need to daven for it. Say Reb Nechunya ben Akana's tefillah. You want to offer your own tefillah. In Shema Karleinu, think about what we're davening. Baruch Shalom, I want this stock to go up. I want that stock to go up. I want this mutual fund to go up. And you have 50 bakashos. They all have to do with, right? With the green. Maybe throw in a little bit also. Ribbon Shalom, when I open the Gemara, give me siyata d'shmaya. It should go in a little better. Maybe I should remember it a little better. I should understand it a little deeper. You should also daven for that. And again, we have a legislated tefillah, but the main yesod is that tefillah is an essential ingredient in hatzlacha and learning. Okay? That is step number one. That's also a nice tefillah. That's Midaraisa, you gotta say. What?
When I went to Israel, just like for Jerusalem, they have these unannounced Shiurim and Nir, and Bris, the ones I went to, and before they avoid whoever the people start, they would say it. They're saying it, so I don't know. Maybe that's just
okay. Good.
They know which the unannounced Shiurim.
Good, very good.
I mean, maybe I don't know.
If you go to Israel, you could go to those Shiurim, but when you in America, you should come to this Shiur. Okay.
Maybe you should introduce yourself.
What?
That come with the guarantee?
No, there are no guarantees in life. No money back guarantees. Okay?
Maybe you should introduce the same.
Okay. Number two. Step number two. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Lama zeh mechir b'yad ksil. Why is this merchandise in the hand of the fool? Liknois chachma, to acquire wisdom, v'leiv oyin, without a heart. Says the Gemara, Oy lohem l'soineyen shel tamidei chachamim. Woe to the enemies of the Torah sages, sha'oiskin b'Torah, that they learn Torah, v'ein bohem yirah shamayim, and they don't have fear of God. So this is a euphemism. Woe to the enemies of Tamei Chachamim means like this. Woe to the Torah sages that they learn Torah and they don't fear God. In other words, Rebbeinu Shalom looks down from Shemayim and he sees a guy learning Torah, and Rebbeinu Shalom says, "What for? Don't do me any favors. What are you doing?" Says the Gemara, someone who learns Torah and they don't have Yirah Shamayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to know for what reason. For what reason? Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that what preserves Torah, what maintains Torah, if you want your Torah to be miskayim, you want to remember your learning, you want to be successful, you need to, ingredient number one. Ingredient number one is kol sheyiras chetoi koidemes l'chachmasai, chachmasai miskayemes. If your Yirah Shamayim precedes your Torah, then your Torah will be successful. Rabbi say, I'm not here today to tell you any chidushim, just reminding ourselves what we already know. That if a person wants to be successful in learning, you need Yirah Shamayim. That is ingredient number one. Reish is Chachma, Yiras Hashem. The Mishnah said, the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph. We know there's 6 Siddharim in Mishnayos. The Gemara darshans the pasuk V'haya Emunas Yitecha, Choisen Yeshuos, Chachma Vadas, and the Gemara says these refer to the 6 Siddharim of the Mishnah. And the Gemara says that La'achar Me'av Esrim Shana, they ask a person a lot of questions. And one of the questions are, do you know these 6 Siddharim, right? How many of the 6 Siddharim do you need to learn? It's not like baseball that you get 33%, you're a Hall of Famer. No. Right? You only have to learn all 6 of them, that's it, right? But, says the Gemara, Va'afilu hachi, I yiras Hashem, hi oitzarai, in, iloi. If you have a storehouse to put it in, if you have an oitzar, if all of your Torah is stored away in a oitzar, then it will be successful. Otherwise, it will not be successful. Says the Gemara, what is the storehouse of Torah? What is the container of Torah? What do you store Torah? What do you preserve Torah in? Says the Gemara, Yiras Hashem hi oitzar. Yirah Shamayim is the storehouse of Torah. In fact, says Rav Chaim Volozhiner in the Nefesh HaChaim in the Shar Dalet, look in Parakeh, number 15. Ulafi Eirech Goydel Oitzar Hayira. The bigger the storehouse, the more Yirah Shamayim. Kain Alzeh Ha'erech Yuchal Likanes Ulehishtamer. To that extent could you remember and preserve your learning. In other words, Torah is commensurate with one's Yirah Shamayim. Says the Nefesh HaChaim. Who gives us Torah? Who's the Noisei Nat Torah? The Rebbeinu Shalom. He's our father. Well, if you're a father, and you have money, and you have kids, guess what the kids want? They want your money. So, when you give your kids money, who do you give more money to? Which kid? I give them all exactly the same. Oh, do you? If one kid is 2 years old, one kid is 18 years old, one kid is 40 years old. Who gets more money? Whoever needs it more. Not always. Very often, the primary factor in a parent's decision of which kid to give more money to is which kid is most responsible. A teenager, by the time, he makes it to the store, he already lost the money, you're going to be careful not to give him too much money. If you have a kid who has a wallet and has a pocket, and he's responsible, you'll give him more money than a kid who's constantly blowing it and losing it. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, Kain hu yizbarach shemai. It's the same thing with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Yadai psucha kiviyachal ashpia tamid l'chol ish me'am skulasai. The Rebbeinu Shalom's hand is open to bestow upon his beloved children Roiv, Chachma, Uvina, Yisera. Great wisdom, great understanding. But you need to have a wallet to put it in. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not going to give it to somebody who's not going to be responsible with it. To someone who's not going to lose it. If you don't have a cup, imagine you're thirsty. What do you like to drink? What cold drink do you like? Soda, which kind? Coca-Cola. So you go to the store, and you buy Coca-Cola, and what are you going to do, drink it out of a bottle? Of course not, so you're a mensch, so you pour into a cup. The problem is the cup has a hole in it. So you spent $1 on the Coca-Cola, and how much is the Coca-Cola worth now? 5 cents deposit. In Maine, maybe you could get 5 cents for the can, but the Coke is out on the floor because you don't have a cup to put it in. Says the Gemara, says in Nefesh HaChaim, you could be the biggest Talmid Chacham in the world. If you don't have your Shamayim, you have nowhere to put the Torah. Guess how much Torah you have? Nothing. The more your Shamayim, the bigger the container, the bigger the wallet, the bigger the case, the more Torah the Rebbeinu Shalom will give you. So if you want to make yourself more of a receptacle for the Chachmas HaTorah, elevate the level of Yiras Shamayim. And therefore, Nefesh HaChaim writes in Parak Vav, Lezois ha'emes, here's the truth. Shezoi hi haderech ha'amiti, this is the true way. Asher bozeh bachar hu yizbarach shema, that God has chosen. Shebechol eis sheyachin ha'adam atzmai lomoid. Whenever you begin to prepare yourself, you come to a shiur, right? And before the shiur starts, so everyone's sitting down, everyone's taking the sheets, and people have to get all the equipment ready. Sometimes it takes a little while. You prepare yourselves, Zaman Muat. What should you think about? Think about a little Yiras Shamayim with purity of heart. Quickly say Vidoy for your Chataim. Purify yourself to learn Torah, B'Kedusha V'Tahara. Now, while you're learning, you should know, learning is not some kind of heebie-jeebie, spiritual pursuit where you take off your glasses and you let the black of your eye roll to the back of your head and then you go like this. Learning is intellectual pursuit. You need to use your brain. You need to think. It's not like tefillah. Nefesh HaChaim says, not devekos, where all of a sudden you're going to feel your soul is uplifted into the heavens. No, Torah is difficult. You need to think. You need to harv. You need to strain your brain. You need to get the cobwebs out of the brain. People think that when you work, then you have to use your head. And when you learn, all of a sudden you learn, then all of a sudden you use hazy thinking. Just the opposite. In order to learn properly, you have to get all the dust and all the cobwebs out of the head. You have to let the cylinders run. You have to grease up all the cylinders, everything. It's not a spiritual, but before you start, you think a moment, a second, Yiras Shamayim, says in Nefesh HaChaim, that is the correct way to begin learning. Ingredient number 2, Yiras Shamayim. So imagine you tell a guy learning physics, you're not getting it because you don't fear God enough. He said, what are you, lost your mind? What planet are you from? You're telling me I don't get E equals MC squared because I'm not sittering and all of it. What does that got to do with anything? Answer is, for physics, Yiras Shamayim has nothing to do with anything. But Torah is not a intellectual discipline. It's a chachmas ha'elyoina. It's a spiritual discipline, and there's certain ingredients, with whether you understand it or not, are essential for being successful in Torah. Number 3. First mission in Avos. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. You sound confident about that. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Here's the problem. Moshe did not receive the Torah, mi Sinai. What? Sinai gave Moshe the Torah? So you're telling me the mountain grew arms?
Bez Sinai.
Me from Sinai?
Bez Sinai.
Bez Sinai. My Mishnah doesn't say Bez Sinai. It says mi Sinai. So what happened? Sinai grew arms with a little hat and handed Moshe the Torah. It should say, Moshe kibel Torah me HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He's the nice thing in Torah. What do you mean mi Sinai? It's good kasha, right? You know who answers kasha? Tosfos. Tosfos, the Tosfos Chadashim, on Perek Yaveh says, you know what it means, Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai? In Tanakh, the mem, there's something called a causative mem. Like, mechatos neviyeha. Because of the sins of her prophets. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe received the Torah because of Sinai. What does that mean? Why was Moshe zoichet to be the one to be makabel the Torah? After all, there were a lot of big people back then. Why him? It's because of a lesson that he learned from Har Sinai. What lesson did he learn? Well, we're all familiar. The Gemara says in Megillah Chav Tes that why the Rebbeinu Shalom picked Har Sinai. It wasn't the tallest, it wasn't the most majestic, it didn't have the nicest trees. I mean, Har Sinai is a little mountain. It's not exactly what you would consider the best photo shoot, right? If you want to make like a tourist attraction, the place of the giving of the Torah, and set up, souvenir shops, you wouldn't know it's Har Sinai if it hit you over the head. Why did Hashem pick Har Sinai? The Gemara says, because it was humble. It says, we see from here, someone is a Baal Gaiva, is a Baal Mum. In other words, why did the Rebbeinu Shalom pick Har Sinai? The Rebbeinu Shalom likes humility. The Gemara says, in Megillah Daf Lamed Aleph, anytime we find the Gevura of Hashem, immediately we comment on God's humility, right? If we were to ask, where does Rebbeinu Shalom like to hang out? If we could say such a thing, the Rebbeinu Shalom says the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Makom, number 20, Sh'ata Moitzei Gvurasai Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ata Moitzei An V'Sanusai. Wherever you find God's Gevura, you find His humility. This is mentioned in the Chumash, it's repeated in the Nevi'im, it's thrice repeated in the Ksuvim. It talks about the greatness of Hashem, but He helps out the widow and the orphan. Koyam Aram V'Nisa, V'Yes Dako Shvaruach Rebbeinu Shalom hangs out with the brokenhearted. And therefore, says Moshe Rabbeinu, I see that the Rebbeinu Shalom forsook every majestic peak in the world, Mount Everest, good thing He didn't give it over there, and all the other mountains He forsook, and He brought it, He gave the Torah on Har Sinai. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, that teaches me that the most important ingredient in being Koine Torah is humility, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Anav who ever lived, Va'ish Moshe, Anav Ma'od, Mikal Ha'adam, Asher Al Pnei Ha'adam. Moshe Kibel Torah. Why was Moshe Makabel the Torah, says Tosfos? Mi Sinai, because of the limud of Har Sinai. In fact, we all know, the Gemara says in Tainus, why is Torah like water? Because just like water always goes down, you haven't seen yet water going up. Torah always goes down to the lowest point. The more humble someone is, the more humility someone has, the more of a kli, the more successful they'll be in learning. So imagine you tell a guy, I'm sorry you're not getting your chemistry, I think you have too much confidence. You need to think you're a nobody. He says, what are you, from Mars? First you tell me to pray, then you tell me to fear God, and now you tell me to have humility? The answer is Torah works differently. It has a different order of operations. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, another very important point. He says, second paragraph, number 22, V'ha'inyin ki al yedei ha'anava zoiche ha'adam ha'koel. Through humility, a person merits everything. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the greatest Navi, the greatest Chacham, but we don't say a word about his Chachma. All we say is V'ha'ish Moshe ana ma'id. V'ilu kaya achshav adam anav ki Moshe. If in 2015 we could find someone who was as humble as Moshe, as self-effacing as Moshe, what's anava? Anava is not sitting in the back of the shul, it's not putting your head down and rubbing your hands a certain way. Anava is a person's recognition that they are not worthy of praise. That's what the Mesillas Yesharim writes. Gaiva is when a person thinks, Loi na'ava tila, they're worthy of praise. But says Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner, if you had today someone who's an anav like Moshe, hayavadai zoiche l'Torah b'shleimus, you would be zoiche to Torah on the highest level. So we would say, why are there no more Moshe Rabbeinus? No one's as smart as him. No one's as holy as him. No one's as humble as Moshe. That's a tremendous chiddush.
Isn't another causative of Limud Torah?
So, what do you mean?
In other words, it comes after Limud Torah. It doesn't come before.
It's both. Look, the Sefer Malas HaTorah says that it's impossible to acquire any good character through any other means other than the Torah. But if a person specializes in humility, if a person excels in humility, humility is a very important trait to bring a person to success in Limud HaTorah. Okay, number 4. The Mishnah says in Perkei Avos, Yeshua ben Prachya Omer, Asei l'cha Rav. Make for yourself a Rebbe. Why do I have to make myself a Rebbe? Baruch Hashem, art scroll. Art scroll. Open up the art scroll, and I read it. Rabbeinu art scroll.
Google.
What?
Google.
Yeah, people could become very big. The more you could become the Google Hadar. Okay? But really, why? What is, why do you need... What? Why do you need a Rebbe? So, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos like this. Rabbeinu Yoina says, you know why you need a Rebbe? Because a person's not a computer. A computer, you just stick in the USB cord. Not that I know exactly what that is, but you just stick it in, and then you feed it information. A human being doesn't just absorb information. A human being is a human. And a human is affected not just by info. A human being is affected by relationships. And if somebody just learns from Sfarim, then all he's doing is he's taking black and white and trying to stuff it into his brain, and maybe all it will do is stay in his brain, but it will not course through his system. It doesn't become part of him. Because a human being is affected by relationships with other human beings. And therefore, it's critical to have a relationship with the Rebbe to learn from another person. But here's the problem. But I'm greater than the Rebbe. I know more than the Rebbe. Not a problem. Says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Asei lecha Rav. You have to make him into your Rebbe. Why do you have to make him into your Rebbe? Says Rabbeinu Yoina, Afilu ata yoidea kamoisai. You know everything that he knows. Any shiur he's going to tell you, you know it 10 times better. What you do is, Asei oisai Rav alecha. You need to mentally say, he is my Rebbe. Why? Mipnei she'adam zoicher ma'shelamad me'rabba yoisem ma'sh'adam loimed me'atzmai. Because what you learn from a Rebbe, you understand more, you remember more than what you learn on your own. So you take anybody, you can know more than him, you could be greater than him, you could daven better than him, you get more Yiras Shamayim than you. Doesn't matter. You say, this person is my Rebbe, and now, even though I know everything he's teaching me, but when I learn it from him, I'm learning it from my Rebbe, it enters your system in a much deeper way. Rabbi Itzel of Petterberg, when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he was already in his 90s. He's after Rabbi Yisrael Salanter passed away. I believe he was together with Rabbi Naftali Amsterdam. And they don't know what to do. They don't have a Rebbe anymore. They don't have Rabbi Yisrael. So they go to Rabbi Shmuel Salant and they say, you are our Rebbe. Rabbi Shmuel says, what do you want from me? You're older than me. He says, no, every Jew has to have a Rebbe. So they went to learn by the feet of Rabbi Shmuel Salant. You could have people, they daven in a shul for 50 years, they have no Rebbe. Because they know better. They know better. And you can have people, they daven in 30 different shuls, and they have 30 rabbeim. Everyone's a rebbe. It's a midah. It's a midah. The midah is, if you have somebody, and you have something to learn from them, in your mind, be meichen them, appoint them. You give them smicha. People ask you, who gave this rebbe Rabbi smicha? I did. I made him my rebbe. Once he's your rebbe, what you learn from him will be on a different level. Okay? That's number 4.
It goes together with another.
That goes together with Anova, it goes together with your Shamayim, right? Yes. Imagine you did some guy in chemistry. Why aren't you getting the material? Because you didn't accept your teacher as your mentor. Either you get what he's telling you, you don't get what he's telling you. Well, I have to be my Rebbe. No. Torah is different. Torah has supernatural means. Okay? Number 5. Says the Shulchan Aruch Harav. When you're learning Torah, Kol Adam Tzarech Lizar Lahaitzi B'Sfasav Lashmiya La'aznav. A person needs to be careful to say the words with his mouth and your ears should hear. Whether you're saying Chumash, whether you're saying Mishnah, whether you're saying Gemara. Unless you're like analyzing a subtlety of a svara and it's going to disturb your train of thought. Let's say I'm singing from a Gemara and I'm just thinking, and really I could say the words. You don't get credit. So here you have a guy, he's learning in the shul for 3 hours. He walks up and he wants to see, Shamayim, tell me, how much reward am I going to get? How much Talmud Torah did I do? Says the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Garnished. If you could pronounce the words, he said, why is that? It's not fair. I have a question. Let's say it comes to Kriya Shema, and you said in your mind, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. You just thought it. You get schar for the mitzvah? Of course not. It's a dibur. Says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, when it comes to Talmud Torah, it's a mitzvah of dibur, and you need to say the words. So you'll ask, what am I doing here? Why am I wasting my time listening to someone else talk? Says Shulchan Aruch Harav, the same way you could hear someone else lane, you could hear someone else, when you go to a shiur, you're yotzei Talmud Torah with shomea ka'ina. By the way, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach argues on the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says it's not true. If you learn and you don't pronounce the words, you still are mekayim in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. By the way, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach we found in number 32. He says when you hear someone else give shiur, it's not the pshat, you're yotzei with shomea ka'ina. The way of learning is sometimes the chavrusa talks and sometimes you talk. When the chavrusa talks, you don't have to be thinking shomea ka'ina. It's not pshat, he has to be moitzi you. It's not when your chavrusa is talking, you have to remind him, before you say that kasha, have in mind to be moitzi me in your kasha. It's not midin shemeka, that's the tzura of Talmud Torah. The tzura, the image, the form of Talmud Torah is sometimes I talk, sometimes you talk.
Give and take.
But nevertheless, the point is still there. It's very important to say the words. When you're learning Torah, it's very important to say the words. It's even a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Look at number 26. If you pronounce the words, if you enunciate the words, you articulate the words, you remember it. But if you say it quietly, you'll forget it quickly. Says the Gemara in Eruvin, who was Rameir's wife? Beria. Beria once found a Talmud who was learning very quietly. Guess what she did to him? She gave him a kick. I don't know if she was wearing high heels exactly, but she kicked him. She kicked him. Says the Gemara, she said to him, Arucha ba'koil u'shmura. If your learning is arranged in all your 248 limbs, you'll remember it. Otherwise, you won't remember it. Says the Marsha, you're telling me when you learn and you pronounce the words, you're learning with all 248 limbs? I understand when you're learning and you say it, so your lips are moving and maybe you're gesticulating, but it's not 248 limbs. Says Marsha, it is. Because when you learn, it causes vibrations. The sound waves vibrate in your entire body, all 248 limbs. It's like you're learning with your entire body. And in fact, in Pirkei Avos, one of the 48 ways of acquiring Torah, number 30, Ba'arichas Sifasayin. Arranging it with your lips. Arranging it with your lips. So, a very important ingredient, if you want to remember your learning, you want it to become part of you, you want to remember it, you want it to course through your system, say the words. Say the words. Yeah, number 6. You ready, Rabbi Isai? You want to hear number 6? Or should we stop here? Oh, okay, fine. We'll do number 6. The Gemara says in Baba Basra, Daf Yud, it's talking about Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Levi. Right? And you should know this Gemara. It's a Shweki song, so you should definitely know it. Shamati shahayu oimrim ashrei mi shabalakan v'talmud b'yadai. Fortunate is someone who comes here and his learning is in his hand. Says the Marsha, what does it mean his learning is in his hand? Says the Marsha, ki ikar halimud, the main learning, v'shenasa bo yiroishem, the main learning that makes an impression on a person, hu halimud haba miksiv asyad, is when you write it. So you want to be successful in learning? Take notes. Write it down. Sometimes, I go to a shiur, and I say, that was unbelievable. I'm going to have to say that sometime, right? And a year later, I'm scratching my head. What was that he said again, right? And sometimes I look at my notes. Right?
It would be good. It would be good.
Good to know. No, I'm just joking. Yeah? No, so the Gemara, sometimes I look at notes, I said, it's a good thing I wrote it down. If I didn't write it down, there's no way I would have remembered it, and it jogs your memory. But it's more than jogging your memory. When you write something down, it leaves a bigger imprint on your neshama, and it gets into your system just a little bit more. Even today, the educational philosophers today, what do they say? If you want to be successful in reaching all the students in the class, use as many modalities as possible. Some children learn better by seeing. Some people learn better by hearing. Some people are more visual learners. The point is you want to involve as many faculties as possible in the learning process, because the more of yourself you involve in the learning, the more it's going to become part of you. So that's the pshat. You want to hear it, you want to say it, you want to write it. And look at number 35 in the Hakdama to Rabbi Olbaum's Svarim on Shas, Gol Yoynei Minchas Chen. He brings down from the Mishnah Avos, Asei lecha Rav. What's the next part of the Mishnah? Ukenei lecha chaver, and buy a friend. So there's a play on words. Ukenei lecha chaver. Ukenei, your pen, your kaneh, lecha chaver, it should be your friend. Your pen should be your friend. When you learn, write down. So here I'm not saying now, all of a sudden after the shiur, every time you learn, you can think, okay, before I start learning, first I have to daven, daven, your shemayim, anova, and all of a sudden you can do all 10 things, and you can become the gadol hador in one day. Halavai, even if you do just one of these things, just a little bit, so we're elevating our level of learning. You hear a shiur, write down one thing that you learned. Write down one thing. It will help you remember, it will help you be more involved, and this way, this will elevate our level of learning. That is number 6, ksiva. Number 7. Yeah? Let's talk a little bit about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, his wife told him to go learn. He learned for 12 years, and he's coming back. And a certain Rasha was talking to his wife. He overhears the conversation the Rasha has with his wife. He said, what are you, crazy? You married a koilel guy? A bench warmer? I told you, what good is he? You're suffering with all the kids. You're suffering. Your husband wasn't even at your kid's bar mitzvah. And now he doesn't even support you. And she says to him, listen up. If he would listen to me, he would go back for another 12 years. Sure enough, Rabbi Akiva turns around, and he heads back. Ask Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, where's the Hakar Satoiv to his wife? Why doesn't he come and say, hello, how you doing? How was the bar mitzvah last week? Who was the caterer? How was PTA Sunday night without me? What did the Rebbe say about Yankala? Nothing. I mean, he does appreciate what she did. He was the one who said, Shali v'shalachem shalah. So where's the Hakar Satoiv? Come and say thank you, and then go back. Says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, in Ruchnius, it's not mathematics. In math, 2 plus 2 is 4, 10 plus 10 is 20. In Ruchnius, Rebbeinu Shalom shows Moshe Rabbeinu, here's Tiberia, here's Tzfas, here's Hebron, here's Yerushalayim, and then Chazal say he showed Moshe Rabbeinu all of Eretz Yisrael. What do you mean? He already saw it. The answer is he only saw each city individually. But the sum of its parts is greater than each component. And it's the same thing with everything in Ruchnius. Learning 2.5 hours does not come anywhere near learning 1 hour. What's 2 people learn? One learned an hour, the other one learned 2.5 hours, and in between, they answered their phone. They're on a completely different level. Because ritzifos, consecutiveness, consistency, without interruption, is on a completely higher level than if the Torah is piskei, broken up. If somebody wants to be successful in learning, however long you could learn. You could learn for 10 minutes without jumping out of your kishkas, without sitting on shpokas. You can learn for 10 minutes, then learn for 10 minutes. Turn off your phone for 10 minutes. You can learn for 15 minutes, turn off your phone for 15 minutes. You learn for an hour, turn it off for an hour. But however much you can only learn a half hour, beautiful. So after a half hour, you take your break. But until that half hour, learn consecutively. It's very important. Whatever amount of time, you can learn for 1 minute, don't interrupt during that minute. However short you could learn, whatever level you're on, try to make it as consistent, as consecutive as possible. Okay? That's number 7. Number 8, and this might be the most important one. Number 8 is, if you think you'll be successful, you sit back in a hammock and drink lemonade and someone's going to feed you grapes and fan you while you learn Shas. It doesn't work. The main ingredient in Talmud Torah is you need to schwitz a little bit. You need to work hard. And even with all the tools that they have today, with the art scroll, and all the Shiurim, and all the Rabbeim, and all the various tools, there is still a lot of room for Amelos. Whatever it is, you sit down to learn, you're a little hungry, you're a little thirsty, you're a little tired, you force yourself, you put in the discipline, and you plug in everyone according to their level. Amelos is critical when it comes to Talmud Torah. Like Chazal say, that if somebody tells you that they understood Torah and they didn't really put in too much effort, they're lying. If somebody tells you, I really tried to understand the sugya, but it didn't go, they're lying. Torah only is successful, Yagati, Umatsasi, Tamin. Imagine a guy in the lab. I can't believe it. I figured it out. I figured something out. So you're a liar. You didn't try hard enough. You did try. He happened to figure it out. Imagine the guy, he says, I've been trying to understand the nuclear physics for 10 weeks now and I don't get it. He doesn't get it. He's not smart enough to get it. Torah is not like that. If you don't try, you don't get it. If you do try, you do get it. Okay. Number 9. Very important. Number 9 is you got to review what you learn. Says number 43. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Omer, Kol haloi me Torah ve'enoi chayzer, doime la'adam shazareya ve'enoi kaitzer. Someone who learns, he doesn't review. It's like here you have a guy. He fertilized his field for 2 months. He plowed. He put in millions of seeds. He had the tallest corn growing in the world. Comes the harvest, he has nothing to eat. And they say to him, what happened to all your food? He says, I don't know. They go out into the field, all the food rotted in the field. The guy didn't cut it. The guy never harvested. Says the Gemara, you could learn Yomam V'Layla. If you don't review what you learn, you're not going to remember a thing. Now, the Gemara in Eruvin tells us, now people don't like when Rabbanim repeat Shiurim. Why can't the rabbi prepare a new Shiur? Doesn't have anything better to do. Yeah? Well, the Gemara says in Eruvin, on Daf Nandal Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Keitzad Seder Mishnah. What was the way that the Torah was taught to Klal Yisrael? The Gemara says, Moshe learned from Hashem, and then Aaron entered, Moshe taught Aaron, and then Aaron sat on Moshe's side, and then the sons of Aaron entered, and Moshe taught them. And then the Zakanim came in, and Moshe taught the Zakanim. And then Klal Yisrael came in, Moshe taught them. And then Moshe left, and Aaron taught his sons, and then Aaron taught the Zakanim, and then Aaron taught Klal Yisrael. It comes out, everybody learns the Torah 4 times. Says the Stipler, from here we see that until a person learns something 4 times, not only have they not reviewed it, they haven't even learned it yet. Somebody says, this Gemara is impossible. It's mamish struggle. No kidding, because you didn't learn it. You learned it 1 time, or maybe you lichazed it 1 time. So of course it's impossible. You didn't learn it. The same way, imagine a guy, he's staring at Gemara Bava Basra. Oy vey, a shver Gemara. No kidding, you didn't open up the book. Of course it's a hard Gemara. Imagine the guy staring at the Chardal like this. Good, a Chacham from the Manishtana, you got to open up the Gemara. You could learn the Gemara once, Gemara twice, 3 times. You could learn the same Gemara. You spend an hour 3 times. I don't get it. No kidding, you didn't learn it yet. You didn't learn it yet. You want to learn something? Do it over and over again. But the yikar is, the more a person reviews his learning, Rav Miller used to say that Chazara is like chewing bread. People think it's boring. No, just the opposite.
Think you're Miller?
Yeah. When you chew bread, the more you chew, people in America, people don't chew food. They swallow. They don't have time. They swallow their food. They chew it once, but the real way to eat is you chew it as much as possible. Because the more you chew bread, the saliva activates on the starches, and it makes it sweeter. Food doesn't taste good unless you chew it more. You have to chew it more. I'm telling you important things here. You want to enjoy your food, you got to chew it extra. The more you chazer something, the sweeter it gets. The sweeter it gets. This is a very important principle in being successful in learning. You say, I don't like to chazer. Yeah, I already learned it. I don't like to chazer. Okay, so we'll give you one more eitzah. And this is step number 10. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia that Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Chia were having a disagreement. They were quarreling, so to speak. And Rabbi Chanina said to Rabbi Chia, you're fighting with me? If the Torah would ever be forgotten, I would give a pilpul shiur and everyone would remember the whole Torah. Rabbi Chia said, you're fighting with me? You know what I would do? I would make sure the Torah is not forgotten in the first place. You know what I would do? I would go ahead and I would plant flax and I would make nets and I would catch deer and I would feed the flesh to Yisayimim and I would write Sefer Torah, I would write Chamisha Chomshei Torah, and I would teach each one of the 5 books to 5 different children, and I would get 6 children, I would teach them each one of the Sudarma Mishnayos, and then that means there are 5 kids that know the Chumash, 6 kids that know the Mishnah, and then I would tell them, okay, you know Bereshis, teach everyone Bereshis. You know Shemais, you teach everyone Shemais. You know Zram, you teach everyone Zram. Frek de Marsha. Why wouldn't Reb Chia just teach all 11 children Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, Zraim, Mayed, Nasha? Why did he teach each one and have them teach? Says the Marsha, the highest level of learning Torah is teaching Torah. And therefore, Reb Chia, for him it did not suffice merely to teach. He wanted his Talmidim to reach the level to be Melamid La'achirim, and therefore he gave each one the opportunity. Somebody once asked the Stipler, said, the Stipler, I don't have time to learn. You know, after the Chazal say, I'm a Rebbe in Yeshiva, I'm a Rebbe, I teach, and I don't have time to chazer my learning 101 times. Says the Stipler that if you prepare a shiur and you know the material and you teach it clearly, that's already 50 times. That's already 50. So, if you're not into chazara, here's the eitzah. The eitzah is, anytime you hear something good, you meet someone, you tell it over to him. He's listening, he's not listening, he cares, he doesn't care, but it's like everything else you tell him. He doesn't care about anything else you say to him anyway. So, take out one good thing from the shiur you heard, and you say it over to him, and you say it over to another guy, and then you say it over Shabbos table, it's already chazered 150 times. Nobody's listening, that's not for them, it's for you. Whenever you can, you don't have to be a Magid Shiur, you don't have to be a Rosh Hashiva. Whenever you hear a good vod, you hear a good Dvar Torah, say it over. And you don't have someone to say it over to yourself. Right? And this way, this is like being Malami La'achirim, it's considered like 50 times. And Yevon Shem should give us Siyata D'Shmaya to implement as many of these eitzes as possible, and we should all be Matzliach in our Limudim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.